Want to go for a walk? Let's start here with the hostas and hydrangeas. This is my little shady area. Down on the ground we have purpleamium, which is a really nice ground cover. Wingstem has a really pretty yellow flower that attracts pollinators, and white snakeroot has a little white cluster of flowers at the top of these long stems. Both of them do really well in the shade over here. And bird bath that I need to fill up. I have the rocks in there for the bees to land on so they don't drown. When it's full, the birds can also enjoy it, and the deer and her fawn come through here and drink from it as well. You can see the chicken yard in the background. They have roughly an acre fenced in, pretty much free range. Lots of pretty hostas down here. It stays a little wet. This is probably the lowest part of the land. A creek runs right there in the background. Drainage ditch, really. I haven't had a fire yet this year. That is a willow that was just strangely bent over one day. But oyster mushrooms grow from it now, so. And it's kind of neat looking, so I'm leaving it. She was struggling to get a foothold, but she's fine. And the sumac is almost ready. Almost ready to make my favorite summertime drink and a tangy spice to use during the winter. Looks like we'll be doing that over the next week. The garden is doing rather well despite the heat wave. We are in the midst of upgrading the garden beds. This is just the first one to see exactly what we want and what we like before we progress through the rest of the garden. These beds are all untreated pine and they're falling apart. So over the next year, we hope to finish the rest of the garden, but we're starting here. It's going to be an herb garden, and that's why these herbs are potted up here. I've got parsley, sage, Italian oregano, summer savory, lemongrass, and thyme, cilantro, and dill right now. So this will be a bed for primarily perennial herbs, and then the annual herbs like basil and cilantro and such can just change from year to year. Here are the peppers in the raised bed next to peppers in grow bags. Here you can see celery plants that have gone to flower. The one in the center hasn't, and so when it does finally bolt, I'll be sure to save the seeds. That's a trait that I'm interested in. These two front beds I like to fill with flowers, and calendula and chamomile are reseeded nicely. I didn't have to do a thing. In this bed here we have squash. I'm growing zucchini and yellow squash vertically for the first time. In the front row I have green beans, and then back here I have way too many cucumber plants growing up a trellis. In this bed we have maturing kale. I'm trying to save seeds. It's hard to be patient and put up with them all season. We'll see if I make it. Most years I cut them down. And my garlic that I need to harvest early. Usually I don't harvest till around 4th of July, but you can see that it has fallen over. That's one of the signs that it's ready, and you can also see the outer leaves have begun to brown and dry up. So I actually plan to do that tonight when it cools down just a bit. We're in the middle of a heat wave in the 90s. So here we've got tomatoes. These are the tomatoes I'm doing in grow bags. Again, the first time I've done that. First time I've used grow bags. Trying to see whether or not I like those. These are planted in my compost and leaf mold. And one thing I noticed is incredibly large stems. just how big they are. And they all seem to be like that. So I don't know if they just like my compost or because they're exposed to more agitation. They had to develop a thicker skin or a thicker stem. Anyway, they look really healthy. Not fruiting as much as I'd like, but with this heat wave, that's kind of understandable. You girls want your treats? You want your snackies, huh? Yeah, these are my pretty girls. The 2 beds with the 3 sisters planting method are doing well. Got bukopi corn and cranberry beans and a bicolor corn, a variety I can't think of at the moment, with some lima beans, both pole beans, and then there's a squash in the center. They are looking wonderful. And my lettuce bed. I've been harvesting 1 head per day for a while now, but it is all slowly starting to bolt, so I'm trying to stay ahead of it. And the tomatoes. Big slicers on the A-frame. You might remember that I planted the left row there without an egg in the planting hole, and the right side I put an egg in each planting hole. I crushed it up. Not for the calcium, just for the excess nutrients. I've seen several others do this, and I just wanted to see a difference. So far, I don't really see much of a difference. They might be slightly taller on the right, on the egg side. A pair of each variety planted at the legs of the A-frame so that I can compare their growth. So we'll evaluate them a little bit later. I did the same thing here with paste variety tomatoes. In these 2 beds, this area of the garden gets a lot of shade. And so in these 2 beds, I'm trying to put some shade tolerant plants, some perennials, some are biennials. I'm just experimenting with a variety of different plants. In this bed, I have white sage for drying, and there's also some mullein plants. I'm going to be sure not to let things go to seed unless I collect those seed and keep them controlled. I don't want them spreading throughout my prairie. Comfrey is known for pulling nutrients from deep in the earth, and so I've located these plants right adjacent to the compost pile. That way I can enjoy the pretty flowers, which will not bloom this year, but they should next year, and I can harvest the leaves to use as biomass, as nutrient-dense green material for the compost beds over here. In this bed, I have some brassicas there. I got planted late. I've got cauliflower up here. I don't even know if they're going to develop. They seem so far behind. And again, this area is shaded, so that's part of the reason why. But there's some collards down there. They'll do fine. Those things grown specifically for their leaves usually do just fine in shade. You can see the compost pile here. I've recently sort of cycled through. I've got some fresh compost breaking down here. I layered chicken manure with kitchen scraps and weeds and other garden refuse that I've pulled out of here. This is just some leftover finished compost, so that I usually layer a little bit of that with each of the layers I just spoke of. On this side, I have compost over here to the left. This side you can see is the leaf mold. And so this whole bed was leaf mold. I just recently separated them. That'll be in another video as soon as I get everything organized. But this still has a lot more decomposing to do. This is a bit slower, where compost is microbial breakdown and usually generates heat, and it's a faster process. Leaf mold is a slower fungal process, and so it's slower, lasts a little bit longer, and oftentimes I will use it as mulch just for that reason. And I did that in the greenhouse this year, and I'm very pleased with the result. We'll go look at that here in just a moment. The hives all seem to be thriving despite the heat wave. We haven't had rain for, oh gosh, I think close to 2 weeks now, and we're expected some tonight. That's why I need to harvest the garlic. So I've been learning a lot about having a greenhouse. The plants get huge. I wasn't expecting that. We had the shade cloth on here a while back, which they were starting to grow very large. And so I'm not sure if we are going to continue using the shade cloth, or I don't know what the fate of that is. You can see these eggplants are big. And so I put things too close together because I was eager to see how everything would do. The tomatoes are doing okay. They went through large growth spurts before they began to flower again. And here's all the peppers. Looks like I'll have lots of peppers. Got some interesting hot peppers this year. I'm planning to ferment some interesting hot sauces. We walk out the backside. It's the bee yard. The fence I put in the doorways each night to keep the deer out. She wants to come in here really bad. And I'm sure she'll decimate things, so I put a little piece of fence in each door. That way I can keep it open for air circulation. There's a service berry. It didn't get pollinated this year. This little one was browsed by a deer, and so there were no flowers to pollinate this one like last year. Last year I had several berries. And then these two are native plums. There were a few on there. There were actually, I think, about a dozen or so. And some aren't there anymore. So I don't know if they fell off or... Let's see. There's one back there. Yeah, you can see that one right there. I think there might be, there's another one down there. There might be 3 or 4 left on here. I would love to try one. This is this plant's 3rd year. Rudbeckia are putting on quite the display this year. They look lovely. This area was disturbed last year. This is where we had some of the fill dirt piles and the topsoil piles that we had brought in for the greenhouse project. And so there's some invasive plants I can see back in there. Mare's tail, or horseweed, sometimes it's known. That is... See those plants. There's a cluster of them, so I need to go pull those or dig them out. I'm not sure what their root system's like. And there was also a butterweed in there somewhere I need to get to. It has just gone to seed. Blackberries are coming on nicely. Lots of fruit development and new canes for next year. And the black raspberry patch has been very fruitful this year. Still have another picking or two. And in this patch of the native orchard, I have more serviceberry, persimmon, chokecherry, and another black cherry. Garlic bulbs are a bit smaller than what I'm used to, but you can see they're ready. You can see each of these leaves that are brown and shriveled up correspond to each of the layers of the skin or the leaves around the garlic bulb. And so if I leave them in any longer, you can see this one's already begun to deteriorate. And if I leave them in any longer, then they will begin to rot and I won't be able to store them at all. So I usually go for 2 to 3 leaves. 1, 2, and 3.